6 weeks into the search for Nebraska's next head coach, and we still got nothing. Trev Alberts won't leave any stone unturned, but he's tight-lipped about who the candidates might be, and outside of some BS Twitter rumors, reports from Sean Callahan, and Mickey Joseph's surprising success so far, it's still anybody's guess for which direction the AD goes. Some fans are all in on Mickey. Some assume because Nebraska needs help on D that Dave Aranda's the favorite, and others are still hoping for a bigger name with more proven success like a Lane Kiffin or a Mark Stoops. But at the end of the day, we gotta wait about 5 more weeks to find out. So today, we're gonna talk about some of the rumors from last week. I'll rank my top 5 realistic candidates, and I'll let you know why they leave their current situations to take over a struggling program in Lincoln. But what's up, guys? I'm Connor Hayden, and this is Corn Crazed. If you're a fan of Nebraska or the Big Ten, hit the subscribe button below to help us get to 15,000. And if you're tired of the rumors and just want to find out who the next coach is, hit the like button now to help more people find this video. But now, let's jump into it.
Yet across midfield. Touchdown, Nebraska! Omar Manning.
Last week, I watched a video from Derek Pearson at Locked On Huskers, and he made the case for Mickey as head coach and told us why he won't be talking about any of the other characters who will never step foot in Nebraska except as an opponent. He said it's a waste of time to talk about any of the outside options right now because this program has a leader and a good coach in Mickey who's still working towards an opportunity to lead this team next season. So first, I want to say I 100% agree with his message about Mickey and the team needing all our support and to keep the faith that they can still and will close this year out strong. I also agree that Mickey deserves a serious look based on how renewed this team feels and how much better they've looked since Frost was let go. But here's the thing, I'm a diehard Nebraska fan. I go to bed at night thinking about the future of this team, and there was a short period where I said, screw everybody else, Mickey's going to be the guy. But this offensive line isn't doing him any favors, and the odds that Trev gives Mickey his first ever D1 job as a head coach feels less likely to happen than any other scenario because getting to 6 wins is going to be tough, and that's what I think it would take at a minimum. So if they lose to Illinois and Michigan, he'll have to beat Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa to even have a shot. And the problem with that is, Trev is going to have to make his decision sooner than Iowa so they can prepare to hire a new coach to start recruiting right when the season ends. So if I had to make a prediction, it's that an Illinois win keeps his hope alive, but a loss probably ends it. And there's nothing wrong with that, because Mickey's a great coach who's going to be back here next year unless a Power 5 school wants to risk taking a shot on him as a head coach, but that feels unlikely. So it's safe to bet that Mickey's going to be back with this staff as a receivers coach or a head coach no matter what in 2023, and there's nothing wrong with us exploring the outside candidates since the honest truth is, one of these guys at another school is probably going to be on our side in the next 40-ish days. And if they aren't and Trev decides to ride with Mickey, I'm not going to be mad about that choice either. This Thursday, we'll be back with the Social Club live stream, and we're going to do college football trivia again. So if you want to participate to win merch, make sure you've got your notifications on so you can see what time we're going to go live the day of, and make sure you join the Discord so you have the opportunity to call in and play. But the Discord link is in the description box below, and once you're in there, you'll see it's really easy to use. 2 weeks ago, we had 4 winners who got shirts, and I sent everybody else who played some stickers. But if you want to support our channel, make sure to check out our merch store where you can get one of our hoodies since it's finally getting cold enough outside to wear one. And this weekend, I went live both Friday and Saturday night for almost 2 hours each. And if you're looking for more long-form style content from me, I definitely check those streams out because they're more casual and conversational with the chat. And I basically do a Q&A in every live show, so there's a lot of variety there. And Saturday, I talked about what Malachi Coleman's commitment means for Nebraska. So if you missed that and you want to get my take, just listen to the first 20-ish minutes of that stream and you'll get the gist. Getting back on track with the coach search. Trev Alberts hasn't given us much in terms of who he's reaching out to or who he might interview, but there are 5 names that both make sense based on what he's looking for and based on who might want to pay or a situation upgrade. And a couple we'll talk about today get mentioned more often than others, but I think they're all legit candidates at this point in the search, or at least guys that Trev is going to try and talk to at some point if he hasn't already. And of course, I got to rank them based on who I think would be the best hire. So I'll break down the pros and cons for each. We'll talk about why they'd leave their current job, and we'll talk about what the chances are that they end up getting hired. Starting with number 5 on this list, I've got Lance Leipold, whose Kansas team is 5-3 and currently in 7th place of the Big 12 standings. He's in his second year as the head coach there, and he had his team off to a crazy hot 5-0 start with one of the top offenses in the country before losing his star QB to a shoulder injury. But since Jalen Daniels went out and they had to ride the backup, Kansas is 0-3 mainly because the offense turns it over almost 4 times as often, and they're not scoring enough in Big 12 shootouts against high-powered offenses like OU and TCU. Leipold's a former QB coach, and he has the 17th ranked total offense nationally as of today. And even though backup Jason Bean isn't as accurate as Daniels was, they're still averaging 32 points a game. On the other side of the ball, their defense ranks 11 spots higher than Nebraska at 113, but that's not good at all considering their schedule so far. Their DC came over from Buffalo after 6 seasons there, but this kind of reminds me of the Eric Shenander hire. You might have heard that Kansas committed to building a brand new $300 million facility for the football program. So you may ask, why would Lance leave for Nebraska? Well, number one, his wife's from Lincoln, and he coached as an assistant at both UNO and under Frank Solich about 20 years ago. Their family has ties to the state, so it wouldn't be some random move since they're already familiar with it. Number two, Kansas can't offer him anywhere near as much money as a Big Ten school. And for some coaches, a few $1,000,000 either way won't change their life. But for a coach like Leipold, who's in his first ever Power 5 head coaching job, this could be his last chance to establish generational wealth for his family. He averaged a few $100,000 a year until last season, so a contract worth $25+ million would be hard to turn down. And number three, his name's as hot as it'll ever be. The odds that he can maintain 8 win seasons at Kansas are low, and this might be the only time he can leave for a job as prestigious as Nebraska. If he stays at Kansas and they don't end up as good as they've looked this year, he's in danger of putting himself in a similar situation as Matt Campbell's in today. Let's talk about the 3 pros for Leipold. Number one, he's already coached at Nebraska, so he has ties to the state, which means he understands the culture and what it'll take to rebuild that program that's gone off the deep end. And we've seen multiple outsiders fail over the last 20 years. And although it doesn't have to be a former player, it does help that the new coach brings in some knowledge of what it takes to win here. Number two, he's brought a Power 5 program back from the dead. Kansas was arguably the worst job in the Power 5 after they let Les Miles go 2 years ago. They hadn't made a bowl game in 15+ years, recruits wouldn't go there, and their fan base just stuck with basketball. He's already beaten Texas and Austin, the stadium's been sold out 3 times, and they're going to make a bowl game despite losing their star QB halfway into the season. And number three, he's a championship level coach and knows how to build a strong culture. He won 6 Division III championships and he won the MAC East twice at Buffalo. So his record as a head coach is 153-52 all time, and that's impressive no matter what level you're coaching at. And for the cons, number one, he doesn't have much Power 5 experience. Coaching in the Big 12 is one thing, but how would he fare against Michigan and Ohio State? Nebraska needs a coach who's experienced enough to game plan against some of the best coaches in the world, and his lack of coaching experience against college football playoff contenders stands out. Number two, his lack of defense is frightening. One thing that Scott Frost failed at big time was making sure that he had the right defensive coordinator and that he had coaches who could build up the line so they could compete with the stronger teams in the Big Ten. If Kansas can't stop teams from putting up 30+ against Big 12 teams, how would this DC fare in a much tougher conference? I'd put Lance Leipold's chances of getting hired at Nebraska at about 5%. I honestly just don't see him as a better option than what we've already got. At number 4, I've got NC State's Dave Doran, who has more 8 and 9 win seasons than he does 7 or less, which kind of reminds me of Bo Pelini, but he's coaching at a less prestigious school with way less resources and tools to be successful. NC State's coming off a 9-win top 20 finish last season and sits at 5-2 today, but they lost their star quarterback to a pec injury, so not sure how great they're going to look the rest of the way. Doran's a strong defensive mind, and he coached linebackers and DBs at both Montana and Kansas before he became the defensive coordinator at Wisconsin back in the late 2000s. His defense ranks number 14 nationally today, and they finished ranked in the top 15 last year, too. The offense isn't great, but they do maximize their talent and average 27 points a game. Bo Pelini's former OC Tim Beck has the same job at NC State now, so I'd be pretty surprised to see him back in Lincoln, but he's coached at both Ohio State and Texas since, and he wasn't the problem when he was at Nebraska, so I'm sure Nebraska fans would have no problem getting him back in that role. This is Doran's 10th year as their head coach, and he's in no danger of losing his job, even with a rough patch, so why would he leave now? Well, number one, he's from Kansas. He played football in college at Drake, which is in Iowa. He coached at Montana, Kansas, Wisconsin, and Northern Illinois, which are all in the Midwest, and this is a great opportunity for him to get back to where he came from. Number two, he's reached his ceiling in the ACC. NC State is one of the top 5 jobs in the conference, but after 10 years, he's never been able to win more than 9 games. And it's only going to get tougher now that they're picking the teams with the 2 best records for conference championship bids. And the powerhouses like Florida State, Miami, and Clemson are all a headache for a school with a smaller brand. Let's talk about the pros for Dave Doran. Number one, he's been a great player developer. Their recruiting classes usually fall somewhere between number 30 and 60 nationally, but he's had 23 players get drafted and 3 that went in the first round. Bonus points here because the first rounders were a defensive end, a center, and a tackle. Number two, he's a defensive minded coach. Outside of last year, Nebraska's defense hasn't been playing at a black shirt level since early on in the Pelini era. And if Nebraska is going to reestablish an identity, Trev needs to bring in a coach who can build the D line and have a defense ranking in the top 20 nationally every season. Number three, he has Big Ten, ACC, and Big 12 experience. The Wisconsin DC experience is a huge plus, but coaching around the country means he knows how to win games and scheme against whatever coach he comes across. Nebraska's last 2 head coaches lacked experience in the Big Ten, and they were never able to get their successful Pac 12 systems to measure up against teams with stronger lines. And the cons. Number one, his teams only finished ranked in the top 25 twice in 9 seasons. The ACC Atlantic isn't terrible, but they've been playing a Louisville team that's up and down, a Florida State team that forgot how to play football after Jimbo left, and other than those 2 in Clemson, the ACC's about as easy as it gets since only one team knows how to win consistently. And number 2, he's never had to rebuild a program from scratch. The Northern Illinois team he took over in 2011 was fresh off a bowl win and 11 wins. So yeah, he had back-to-back 11 and 12 win seasons there, but he inherited a good team. NC State won 9, 8, and 7 games in the 3 years before he took over, so averaging 7 wins a year isn't all that impressive. I'd say Dave Doran's chances of getting hired by Trev are the exact same as Leipold at 5%. He doesn't have the Nebraska tie, but he does have more Power 5 coaching experience, and a defensive mind is way more attractive since the last head coach was all about the offense and he couldn't make it work. My number 3 is Mark Stoops at Kentucky, who was off my radar until Sean Callahan reported that he's a legitimate name to watch in this search. In the last 4 years, his team's finished with 10 wins, a bowl win, and 6 day 1 or day 2 draft picks in the NFL. And that might sound good, but it's actually amazing when you put it into context, because the Kentucky football program in the SEC East is equivalent to Minnesota or Purdue in the Big Ten West. Stoops has a strong background as the DB coach at Miami in 2001, correct? And then the DC at both Arizona and Florida State back when they were dominant. And Kentucky has a top 15 defense nationally today, but their offense has one of the top QBs in the country who could go in the top 5 of this next draft. Their new OC spent the last 5 years as a quarterbacks coach and a coordinator in the NFL, but this offense has looked a lot like the Big Ten West offenses that Nebraska faces every week. They're there to score when they can, but mostly manage the clock and avoid turnovers to let the defense put them in good enough field position to just score enough to win. Stoops is in year 10 here, and his team's on pace for their 3rd top 25 finish in the last 5 years. So why would he leave now? Well, number one, Kentucky's a basketball school. They'll never pay him as much as they pay Calipari, and they'll never give him the facility upgrades a real football school will. And he'll forever be stuck in somebody else's shadow. Number two, his brand of football matches up perfectly with the Big Ten. And instead of being at a mediocre school and doing more with less in the SEC, he can lead one of the top 5 programs in the Big Ten and finally get the respect he deserves. We'll talk about the pros for Stoops. Number one, he's an overachiever. Kentucky's nothing special in their division, and they've been competing with Georgia, Florida, and Tennessee to finish second in their division 3 times since he took over. Number two, he's great at identifying talent that fits his system. Wan'Dale Robinson was a decent receiver at Nebraska, but Stoops turned him into a star who's already starting in the NFL as a rookie. And Will Levis left Penn State as a backup and looks like one of the top 3 pro-style quarterbacks in the country this year. And number 3, he can win the big games. Since 2018, Stoops is 9-9 against ranked opponents, and given that so many SEC teams are ranked when he plays them and that some are going to be back-to-back, that's a great record at a school like Kentucky. I only found one real con. It took him a long time to build Kentucky into a serious competitor. He didn't make a bowl game until season number 4, and he didn't go over 7 wins until season number 6. In today's climate, you need to flip a program faster, but my guess is that with more resources and the transfer portal to help, he has the potential to do it. Mark Stoops is as close to perfect as we can ask for. He has the experience, he's a proven winner, a good recruiter, and he's a player developer. On top of all of that, he's in a great spot to leave for a school that can pay him more and give him the tools that can help take him to the next step of his career, which is winning a conference championship. I'm sure Trev will reach out to him, and I would not be shocked if this was a top 3 coach on his list. I'd put the chances of getting Stoops at 25%. At number 2, I've got Baylor's Dave Aranda, who's been the hottest name mentioned over the past month or so. He took over a Baylor team that had just come off a 7-11 win season, but in year 1, he went 2-7. To be fair, it was his first ever head coaching job, and the COVID season probably held him back, but he bounced back strong to hit 12 wins and a top 5 finish in his second season. His defense finished number 10 nationally last season, and they rank in the top 60 today, but this is a rebuilding year. At Wisconsin and LSU, he had great Ds, and the fact that he was able to do it at Baylor proved he's going to be able to do this anywhere he goes. His offensive coordinator's name is Jeff Grimes, and he's known for his big year back at BYU with Zach Wilson in 2020. But today, Baylor's ranked in the top 30 nationally for total offense, and they rely heavily on the run game. So it doesn't hurt that Grimes spent 16 years as an offensive line coach before taking over as an OC. But because he's been so successful, I'm not sure that Baylor would let him leave without offering him that head coaching job first. Aranda's building something special at Baylor, and he's got a great staff in place, so why would he leave now? For starters, he could reconnect with both Mickey Joseph and Bill Bush from the national championship year at LSU. And that staff wasn't perfect, but there were some great pieces, and these 3 were some of the best on that staff. Number 2, the Big 12 isn't going to be the upper echelon of college football much longer. They're adding UCF, Houston, Cincinnati, and BYU, but they lose Texas and OU. So how does this change the recruiting and the playoff implications for the future? And number 3, Nebraska can give him a massive contract and up his assistant pay pool. More money for his assistants means he can afford to bring in the best parts of his staff, and he can retain a coach like Mickey Joseph, who deserves to be paid a coordinator salary with a position coach job title. And here are my pros for Aranda. Number 1, he spent 7 years as a DC at Wisconsin and LSU, where his teams won over 75% of their games and finished in the top 25 every single season. Number 2, he has ties to Nebraska's 2 most promising coaches in Bush and Joseph, and he could enhance their recruiting efforts the day he gets hired. And number 3, his defenses at Wisconsin never ranked worse than number 10 nationally. Just imagine Nebraska with a top 10 defense again. I know, it's hard, but just try. But on the flip side, I did see a couple cons. Number 1 is that he has very limited head coaching experience. In 3 years, he's only coached 30 games total. Year 1, he went 2-7. Year 2, he went 12-2. And now he's on pace to go 7-5. So was he a one-hit wonder? Is this a rebuilding year? There are some questions out there that we won't get answers to, and We're taking a risk similar to the one that Moose did when he brought Frost in after just one big season. Number two, he's going to be expensive. Aranda's making around $6 million right now, so Nebraska's going to have to at least pay 7.5 or maybe 8 to get him to leave. And that doesn't include the massive buyout since he's under contract until 2029. Trev can get the boosters together and do it, I'm sure, but after what we've seen with Mel Tucker and Jimbo Fisher, is it worth the risk? Aranda's ties to the Big Ten, his recent record at Baylor, and his relationship with Mickey Joseph make him a no-brainer hire if it makes sense financially. But there's still risk since he hasn't been a head coach for very long. I wouldn't be surprised if Trev and Dave already had the conversation because of the pros we listed, and I'll put this at a 55% chance of happening. And last, we've got my number one, Lane Kiffin. He's the most experienced head coach on this list. He has the strongest ties to Nebraska on this list. He has the most wins on this list, and he's the undisputed best recruiter on this list. Lane's dad is Monty Kiffin, who played at Nebraska in the 60s before becoming a defensive assistant under Bob Devaney and then the DC under Osborne. And Lane was born in Lincoln, but he grew up all over since his dad was a football coach, and he ended up as the quarterback at Fresno State, or the backup quarterback at Fresno State, before he got his first job as a position coach at USC when he was only 26. And he wanted the Nebraska job after Solich was fired, but Callahan got it, and Lane eventually got hired as the head coach for the Raiders before he coached at Tennessee and USC. He failed at those first three jobs as a head coach, so Nick Saban took him in as an OC and helped him get his head right, and ever since he got back on track, his record is 48-22, which is even more impressive since he did it at FAU and Ole Miss. Lane's offense was pass heavy last year, but his rushing offense ranks number 3 nationally this season. In my opinion, he's a no-brainer for Nebraska. But why would he take this job? Well, Ole Miss, like Kentucky, is a bottom feeder in the SEC, and maybe we can call a middle of the pack, but a coach who's as decorated as Kiffin almost certainly wants a Tier 1 or a Tier 2 job and to compete for national championships. Can't do that at Ole Miss. He's voices issues with fans not showing up to games, and he makes comments and Twitter posts hinting at how he feels about his current spot. So Lane is going to leave Ole Miss for a Nebraska, an Auburn, Texas A&M, or somewhere else with more resources. We just don't know how soon he's going to make that move. Some pros for Kiffin. Number one, he's an elite offensive mind who's been an OC on 3 teams who played for a national championship. Number two, he's great at social media, and he's a great recruiter who understands today's kids, unlike most college football coaches. His recruiting class at Ole Miss ranked number 15 nationally last year, and the transfer class ranked number 2. And that was one of the best recruiting efforts in the country for a school who's not a traditional powerhouse. And number 3, he's a program builder. FAU was winning 3 games a year before he got there, and he led them to 2 11-win seasons out of the 3 he was there. Ole Miss averaged 5 wins a year under their previous head coach, and Lane got him to 10 wins in year 2, and he could get him to 10 wins again this season if they can win their bowl game. I didn't find any cons with Kiffin, but he would cost at least $9 million a year. And his contract's up in 2025, so the buyout wouldn't be that bad either. Some people say he's a program hopper, but he left Tennessee for USC after 1 season because SC was his dream job and where his career started, so I don't see him doing that again. He's a troll on social media, and he might annoy some fans with his attitude, but it's hard to complain about a coach who wins as much as he does. Mickey and Lane would be the dream recruiting duo, and we'd see a 5-star at Nebraska pretty quick with those 2 in charge. This is the closest there is to a sure thing, but Trev said he's not trying to win the press conference, and this would be the definition of a flashy hire. I'm not sure Lane wants to coach in the Big Ten since he never has before, and I don't think Trev is going to go with him over Dave Aranda, so I'll put the chances at 15%, but man, this would be a sure way to make Nebraska football fun again. Dave Aranda, Lane Kiffin, and Mark Stoops are all great coaches, and based on what we've seen this year, I'd guess all 3 of those guys leave for bigger jobs soon, even if we're not the right fit. But I want to know what you think, so let me know in the comments below. Who's your number 1 choice for head coach if Mickey's not the one? Do you trust Dave Aranda with only 3 years of experience, or would you prefer a guy like Stoops who's been at it for a lot longer? Is Lane Kiffin a good idea, or is he too wild for Nebraska fans? I'm just hoping that whoever comes in teams up with Mickey to land a fantastic class that can help this team win ASAP. That's all I got for you today, and I'll be back on Wednesday with the Illinois preview. So until next time, thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Go Big Red.